This is a video response to Esplin227's second video response to me. He actually made two of them. One was 40 minutes long, which I'm not going to respond to in this video, because I already did that in comments. And then he made a 20-minute video, which is what going to be a response to in this video. Now, before I begin this video, I want to thank you for having the maturity to realize that you messed up and the way you treated me. And vice versa, I apologize as well. Also, however, one thing you need to remember is this. You have to understand where I'm coming from when the way you're presenting yourself. You have to understand the frustration I was experiencing when I was watching both of your videos, one to Rational Roundtable and the other one was to me, and the way you conducted yourself and the way you treated me. So the frustration was there. You have to understand the frustration of me watching that video and me feeling obligated to make a response to a video that, from my initial impression of you, was you being an ass. But that's okay. That's behind us. It's okay. That's in the past, so let's just move on. Everything's fine now. Alright. Let's move on to some of the claims you made in your video. The first claim is... No, sorry. The first thing you were asked is you were puzzled about me not being a proponent of Kalam. And you basically asked is, how can I not be a proponent of Kalam, but still believe in the Christian conception of God? Very simple, really. There are three main cosmological arguments. Kalam is not the only cosmological argument. There is the Kalam, which is very well known. There's the Thomistic cosmological argument. Then there's the Leibnizian cosmological argument. I think what you're confusing is it doesn't fall. Yes, it's possible for the Christian conception of God to exist, but Kalam to be false, because Kalam is not the only cosmological argument. There are multiple cosmological arguments. There are three types of cosmological arguments. The first one is based on the possibility of essentially ordered infinite regress, and that's the Thomistic cosmological argument. Then there's the cosmological argument that holds that infinite temporal regress is impossible because an actual infinite is impossible. That's Kalam. Then the other one is based on the idea of the PSR, which is the principle of sufficient reason. I hold to the Thomistic cosmological argument and the Leibnizian cosmological argument, but I'm not an advocate of the Kalam argument. That's how it works. I'm not going to go into defending both the Thomistic or the Leibnizian. That's not the point of this video. Okay, but the whole point is I am not a proponent of the Kalam because I doubt its soundness. It's syllogistically a valid argument, but I have doubts about its soundness. I have a video about that. I'll post that in the description box. I would recommend you watch that. Now, all of my sources will be posted in the description box, so if you decide to make a video response to this, please take the time to go through all sources in the description box. I highly recommend you do that. Okay. Another prominent thing you accuse me of is what you called scrambling, which you just defined it as scrambling for sources. That's like accusing someone of source flooding. There's nothing wrong with providing a source. It doesn't matter how many sources you're providing. You're providing sources for your position. So this is just a silly claim. I don't know why you felt this was something that devastated my argument. I was just simply pointing you to two videos, one by Cartesian Theists and one by Theologica37, about the definition of faith. You make a very big deal about how Christians redefine faith. Okay, I think you need to understand that you're not allowing the theists to define their position. You're not letting them define their position. When you are saying faith is this, without allowing the Christian theologians or Christian apologists or whatever, you're not allowing the Christians to find their own position. What I mean by this, let me give you an analogy that you'll understand. Let's suppose that I'm a scientist and you're just an average Joe. Let's, for the sake of the argument, say that I'm an evolutionary biologist and you don't accept the theory of evolution. When I tell you that evolution is the most widely accepted theory within the scientific community, you would say, but evolution is just a theory. Now, if you tell me that as a scientist, I as a scientist would just stare at you because you inadvertently told me as the scientist that you don't understand how the scientific consensus defines the word theory. It does not matter if the entire globe defines the word theory differently from the scientific community. Words are not defined by their etymology, they are defined by their usage. And within the context of the scientific community, the word theory has a different meaning than the colloquial usage within society. Now, you'll probably say, but that's different. We're talking about a philosophical or theological concept and talking about Christians redefining faith so they can win an argument. Again, problem is, words are defined by their usage. And if Christian theology defines faith differently from how atheists and non-Christians define it, then I'm sorry, that Christians define faith within their theology. You may not like that, but I'm sorry, if you have a problem with that, then I don't mean to be blunt, but that's too bad. Christians define faith differently. You have to understand what Christians are doing. You are not allowing the theist, which is in case the Christian, to define their own position, and instead trying to define their position for them. Just like when someone doesn't accept the theory of evolution by trying to define the word theory for the scientists. In a sense, you are trying to redefine the word for the scientists, differently from how the scientific community defines it. And not only are you not allowing the theists to define what they specifically mean by the word faith, but you're not allowing them to define their understanding of the concept of faith. I would challenge you to find me at least 3 Christian philosophers or theologians, such as Richard Swinburne, Thomas Aquinas, John Henry Newman, or even just G.K. Chesterton, of defined faith the way you are defining faith, or everyone else defines faith. Until you can do that, then I'm afraid that I have no choice but to not take your argument seriously. You may not like that, and I'm not trying to be blunt. I'm not trying to be an ass, but that's the cold, honest truth. Unless you can show how Christians, theologians define faith the way you're defining it, then I can't take that claim Then I can't take your claim seriously. That's just the way it is. Now, one last thing. In your video, you continually claim that faith is belief in or without evidence or in spite of evidence, and that claim that faith does not lead to knowledge. Problem is, you're right, faith does not lead to knowledge because faith is based on knowledge. There's a big difference between the two. Even St. Thomas Aquinas himself believed that reason can lead someone to believe in God. You're confusing how Christians define their understanding of faith. Now, when you say that Christians believe in spite of or without evidence, you are forgetting something. In rhetoric, there's ethos, pathos, and logos. For this video, we're going to focus on logos. Logos is the Greek word for word, and in that case, evidence. Evidence can be also defined as testimony or subjective experiences. That is evidence to the individual person or group. Evidence of spoken human testimony, evidence of historical records, or evidence of subjective experiences. You may reject those evidence, but those are evidence that Christians accept as valid. And so my point is, when you say that Christian faith is belief without evidence, does that also mean without evidence of human testimony or human historical records or subjective experiences? Those count as evidence. They may not qualify as empirical evidence, but they're still counted as evidence. You may reject them as evidence, but they do count as evidence to the Christian. Again, you need to allow the Christian to define what they mean by faith and reason. But no, not reason. You need to allow the Christian to define what they mean by faith. Because when you're saying that faith is belief without evidence or in spite of evidence, you are strawmanning the Christian position. You may accuse a Christian of redefining the understanding of faith, but again, you're not allowing the Christian to define their position. When you do this, you're strawmanning, and you don't like it when theists try to redefine what you mean by specific terms, such as atheists. Why should you do it to us? That's my point. Now, I'm gonna probably make this a two-part video. But before I end this and get to the second video, I think this paragraph, this statement by John Paul II, says it best. What is distinctive in biblical text is the conviction that there is a profound, indissoluble unity between the knowledge of reason and the knowledge of faith. The world and all that happens within it, including history and the fate of peoples, are realities to be observed, analyzed, and assessed with all the resources of reason, but without faith ever being foreign to the process. Faith intervenes not to abolish reason's autonomy, nor to reduce its scope for action, but solely to bring the human being to understand that in these events it is the God of Israel who acts. Thus the world and the events of history cannot be understood in depth without professing faith in the God who is at work in them. Faith sharpens the inner eye, and opening the mind to discover in the flux of events the workings of providence. Here the words of the book of Proverbs are pertinent. The human mind plays the way, but the Lord directs the steps. Proverbs 16:9. This is to say that with the light of reason, human beings can know which path to take, but they can follow that path to its end, quickly and unhindered. Only if with a rightly turned spirit that they search for it within the horizon of faith. Therefore, reason and faith cannot be separated without diminishing the capacity of men and women to know themselves, the world, and God in an appropriate way. And that's Pope John Paul II. So again, before I end this part 1 and go into part 2, please, you may not like how Christians redefine faith. But Christians have defined faith like that almost since the beginning. And if you can demonstrate otherwise, that faith is based on reason, then you're strawmanning the Christian position. You need to allow the Christian to define their position. Again, I'm repeating myself, so I'm going to move this up to part 2.